Hello. Hi. Hey, everybody. Hi. Now, you might be wondering why we're still sitting on the starting soon screen. And the answer to that would be that I have a little surprise for everybody, but I forgot to set up the surprise in a surprise format before I started the stream, so I can't like toggle it on. You'll see. So essentially, I have a surprise for everybody. It's a really cool surprise. Um, and I'm really excited about it. And I want to get really quickly, I just want to talk about that before I start, reading little bedtime stories to you, having a little chill vibe. Um, but I do want to talk about it before we get into that. So, is everybody ready? Is everybody, how do you say, buckled in? Oh, I hope you're buckled in because, drum roll please. Oh my god! Hi! Hi everybody! What are we doing? Look, it's me! It's me! I'm so excited. I'm so excited. Look at how cute I am. Look at my little ear wiggles. Guys, are you excited? I'm so excited. Also, I'm not going to show it now. I'll show it maybe in a different stream, but I do have a full body. I have a full little outfit on. I have a cute little moment going on. I also, this is the part that you'll get to see because, so what we're starting with today, I have a bunch of stories. I have a bunch of stories picked out. But what we're going to start with today is a fan favorite and a me favorite, my favorite. My favorite as a child, my favorite now. We're gonna start with Alice in Wonderland. Because that's like my whole theme. That's my whole theme as a little guy. That's my little theme. Okay, so we're gonna start off with Alice in Wonderland, and because of that, I have, so as we all know, I'm the Misfit. I'm a little guy. I'm a little demon guy. But I have a human form. I have a human form. Look at me go. I'm so cute. I'm so cute. I'm great. Ah, look at me go. I'm adorable. This is my little Alice, my little disguise. Ooh, I'm hiding. Hiding in your Wi-Fi. Okay. But I also have I can read a little book. I can read a little book to you guys. Isn't that so cute? Isn't that so cute? Hell yeah. I'm so excited about this. I know, a normal person wouldn't debut their first model on Twitch at like 2:30 in the morning because no one's gonna see it. But that's for normal people. That's not for me. I'm different. I'm different and special and insane. Debut at a proper time, normally, not scuffed. Me, Vermilion Misfit, the Misfit? I think not. I absolutely think not. So, I hope that everyone's ready. I hope that everyone's prepared. I hope that everyone's buckled in. And I also just realized that I forgot to turn the Spotify back on. So now you can actually hear rain sounds and music and lo-fi while I read to you. It's a little bit of a scuff stream, but we love it here. It's a good time. And I'm gonna start reading. So, This is Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. One of my favorite stories. And, I hope that it's your favorite too after this. Alice was beginning to get very tired of sitting by her sister on the bank and of having nothing to do. Once or twice she had peeped into the book her sister was reading, but it had no pictures or conversations in it. And what is the use of a book, thought Alice, without pictures or conversations? So she was considering in her own mind, as well as she could, for the day made her feel very sleepy and stupid, whether the pleasure of making a daisy chain would be worth the trouble of getting up and picking the daisies. When suddenly, a white rabbit with pink eyes ran close by her. There was nothing so very remarkable in that, nor did Alice think it so much very out of the way to hear the rabbit say to itself, oh dear, I shall be too late." But when the rabbit actually took a watch out of its waistcoat pocket and looked at it and then hurried on, Alice started to her feet, for it flashed across her mind that she had never before seen a rabbit with either a waistcoat pocket or a watch to take out of it. And burning with curiosity, she ran across the field after it and was just in time to see it pop down a large rabbit hole under the hedge. In another moment, down went Alice after it. The rabbit hole went straight on like a tunnel for some way, and then dipped suddenly down, so suddenly that Alice had not a moment to think about stopping herself before she found herself falling down what seemed to be a very deep well. Either the well was very deep, or she fell very slowly, for she had plenty of time, as she went down, to look about her. First, she tried to make out what she was coming to, but it was too dark to see anything. Then she looked at the sides of the well, and noticed that they were filled with cupboards and bookshelves. Here and there she saw maps and pictures hung upon pegs. She took down a jar from one of the shelves as she passed. It was labeled Orange Marmalade, but to her great disappointment, it was empty. She did not like to drop the jar, so managed to put it into one of the cupboards as she fell past it. Down, down, down. Would the fall never come to an end? There was nothing else to do, so Alice soon began talking to herself. Dinah'll miss me very much tonight, I should think. Dinah was the cat. I hope they'll remember her saucer of milk at tea time. Dinah, my dear, I wish you were down here with me. Alice felt that she was dozing off, when suddenly, thump, thump, down she came upon a heap of sticks and dry leaves, and the fall was over. Alice was not a bit hurt, and she jumped up in a moment. She looked up, but it was all dark overhead. Before her was another long passage, and the white rabbit was still in sight, hurrying down it. There was not a moment to be lost. Away went Alice like the wind, and was just in time to hear it say, as it turned a corner, Oh, my ears and whiskers, how late it's getting. She was close behind it when she turned the corner, but the rabbit was no longer to be seen. She found herself in a long, low hall, which was lit up by a row of lamps hanging from the roof. There were doors all round the hall. They were all locked, and when Alice had been all the way down one side and up the other, trying every door, she walked sadly down the middle, wondering how she was ever to get out again. Suddenly, she came upon a little table, all made of solid glass. There was nothing on it but a tiny golden key, and Alice's first idea was that this might belong to one of the doors of the hall. But alas, either the locks were too large or the key was too small, but at any rate, it would not open any of them. However, on the second time round, she came upon a low curtain she had not noticed before, and behind it was a little door about 15 inches high. She tried the little golden key in the lock, and to her great delight it fitted. Alice opened the door and found that it led into a small passage, not much larger than a rat hole. She knelt down and looked along the passage into the loveliest garden you ever saw. How she longed to get out of that dark hall and wander about among those beds of bright flowers and those cool fountains. But she could not even get her head through the doorway. "Oh," said Alice, "how I wish I could shut up like a telescope. I think if I could, if I only knew how to begin." Alice went back to the table, half hoping she might find another key on it, or, at any rate, a book of rules for shutting people up like telescopes. This time she found a little bottle on it, which certainly was not here before, said Alice, and tied round the neck of the bottle was a paper label, with the words "Drink me" beautifully printed on it in large letters. "No, I'll look first," she said, "and see whether it's marked poison or not." For she had never forgotten that if you drink from a bottle marked poison, it is almost certain to disagree with you sooner or later. However, this bottle was not marked poison, so Alice ventured to taste it, and finding it very nice, it had a sort of mixed flavor of cherry tart, custard, pineapple, roast turkey, toffee, and hot buttered toast. She very soon finished it off. "Thank you so much for the follow, by the way." "What a curious feeling," said Alice. "I must be shutting up like a telescope." And so it was indeed. She was now only 10 inches high, and her face brightened up at the thought that she was now the right size for going through the little door into that lovely garden. After a while, finding that nothing more happened, she decided on going into the garden at once. But alas for poor Alice. When she got to the door, she found she had forgotten the little key, and when she went back to the table for it, she found that she could not possibly reach it. She could see it quite plainly through the glass, and she tried her best to climb up one of the legs of the table, but it was too slippery, and when she had tired herself out with trying, the poor little thing sat down and cried. "Come, there's no use in crying like that," said Alice to herself rather sharply. "I advise you to leave off this minute." She generally gave herself very good advice, though she very seldom followed it, and sometimes she scolded herself so severely as to bring tears into her eyes. Soon her eye fell on a little glass box that was lying under the table. She opened it and found in it a very small cake, on which the words "Eat me" were beautifully marked in currants. "Well, I'll eat it," said Alice, "and if it makes me grow larger, I can reach the key, and if it makes me grow smaller, I can creep under the door. So either way, I'll get into the garden, and I don't care which happens." She ate a little bit and said anxiously to herself, "Which way, which way?" holding her hand on top of her head to feel which way she was growing, and she was quite surprised to find that she remained the same size. So she set to work and very soon finished off the cake. Chapter 2. The Pool of Tears. "Curiouser and curiouser," cried Alice. She was so much surprised that for the moment she quite forgot how to speak good English. "Now I'm opening out like the largest telescope that ever was. Goodbye, feet. Oh, my poor little feet. I wonder who will put your shoes and stockings on for you now, dears. I shall be a great deal too far off to trouble myself about you." Just at this moment, her head struck against the roof of the hall. In fact, she was now rather more than 9 feet high, and she at once took up the little golden key and hurried off to the garden door. Poor Alice, it was as much as she could do, lying down on one side, to look through into the garden with one eye, but to get through was more hopeless than ever. She sat down and began to cry again. She went on shedding gallons of tears until there was a large pool all round her and reaching half down the hall. After a time, she heard a little pattering of feet in the distance, and she hastily dried her eyes to see what was coming. It was the White Rabbit returning, splendidly dressed, with a pair of white kid gloves in one hand and a large fan in the other. He came trotting along in a great hurry, muttering to himself, "Oh, the Duchess, the Duchess! Oh, won't she be savage if I've kept her waiting?" When the rabbit came near her, Alice began, in a low, timid voice, If you please, sir. The rabbit started violently, dropping the white kid gloves and the fan, and scurried away into the darkness as hard as he could go. Alice took up the fan and gloves, and she kept fanning herself all the time she went on talking. Dear, dear, how queer everything is today. And yesterday things went on just as usual. Was I the same when I got up this morning? But if I'm not the same, the next question is, who in the world am I? That's the great puzzle. As she said this, she looked down at her hands and was surprised to see that she had put on one of the rabbit's little white kid gloves while she was talking. How can I have done that? She thought. I must be growing small again. She got up and went to the table to measure herself by it, and found that she was now about 2 feet high, and was going on shrinking rapidly. She soon found out that the cause of this was the fan she was holding, and she dropped it hastily, just in time to save herself from shrinking away altogether. That was a narrow escape, said Alice, a good deal frightened at the sudden change, but very glad to find herself still in existence. And now for the garden! And she ran with all speed back to the little door. But alas, the little door was shut again, and the little golden key was lying on the glass table as before. Things are worse than ever, thought the poor child, for I never was so small as this before, never. As she said these words, her foot slipped, and in another moment, splash! She was up to her chin in salt water. Her first idea was that she had somehow fallen into the sea. However, she soon made out that she was in the pool of tears which she had wept when she was 9 feet high. Just then she heard something splashing about in the pool a little way off, and she swam nearer to see what it was. She soon made out that it was only a mouse that had slipped in like herself. Would it be of any use now, thought Alice, to speak to this mouse? Everything is so out of the way down here that I should think very likely it can talk. At any rate, there's no harm trying. So she began. Oh, mouse, do you know the way out of this pool? I am very tired of swimming about here, oh mouse. The mouse looked at her rather inquisitively, and it seemed to her to wink with one of its little eyes, but it said nothing. Perhaps it doesn't understand English, thought Alice. I dare say it's a French mouse, come over with William the Conqueror. So she began again. Où est ma chette? Which was the first sentence in her French lesson book. The mouse gave a sudden leap out of the water and seemed to quiver all over with fright. Oh, I beg your pardon, cried Alice hastily, afraid that she had hurt the poor animal's feelings. I quite forgot you didn't like cats. Not like cats, cried the mouse in a shrill, passionate voice. Would you like cats if you were me? Well, perhaps not, said Alice in a soothing tone. Don't be angry about it. And yet I wish I could show you our cat Dinah. I think you'd take a fancy to cats if you could only see her. She is such a dear, quiet thing. The mouse was bristling all over, and she felt certain it must be really offended. We won't talk about her any more, if you'd rather not. We indeed, cried the mouse, who was trembling down to the end of its tail, as if I would talk on such a subject. Our family always hated cats, nasty, low, vulgar things. Don't let me hear the name again. I won't indeed, said Alice, in a great hurry to change the subject of conversation. Are you fond of dogs? There is such a nice little dog near our house. I would like to show you. It kills all the rats and... Oh dear, cried Alice in a sorrowful tone. I'm afraid I've offended it again. For the mouse was swimming away from her as hard as it could go, and making quite a commotion in the pool as it went. So she called softly after it, Mouse dear, do come back again, and we won't talk about cats, or dogs either if you don't like them. When the mouse heard this, it turned round and swam slowly back to her. Its face was quite pale, and it said in a low, trembling voice, "Let us get to the shore, and then I'll tell you my history, and you'll understand why it is I hate cats and dogs." It was high time to go, for the pool was getting quite crowded with the birds and animals that had fallen into it. There were a duck and a dodo, a lory and an eaglet, and several other curious creatures. Alice led the way, and the whole party swam to the shore. Chapter 3: A Caucus Race and a Long Tail. They were indeed a queer-looking party that assembled on the bank. The birds with draggled feathers, the animals with their fur clinging close to them, and all dripping wet, cross, and uncomfortable. The first question, of course, was how to get dry again. They had a consultation about this, and after a few minutes, it seemed quite natural to Alice to find herself talking familiarly with them, as if she had known them all her life. At last the mouse, who seemed to be a person of some authority among them, called out, "Sit down, all of you, and listen to me. I'll soon make you dry enough." They all sat down at once in a large ring, with the mouse in the middle. "Ahem," said the mouse, with an important air. "Are you all ready? This is the driest thing I know. Silence all round, please. William the Conqueror, whose cause was favoured by the Pope, was soon submitted to the English, who wanted leaders, and had been of much late accustomed to usurpation and conquest. Edwin and Morcar, the Earls of Mercia and Northumbria." "Oh," said the Lory with a shiver. "And even Stigand, the patriotic Archbishop of Canterbury, found it advisable." "Found what?" said the duck. "Found it," the mouse replied rather crossly. "Of course, you know what it means." "I know what it means well enough. When I find a thing," said the duck, "it's generally a frog or a worm. The question is, what did the Archbishop find?" The mouse did not notice this question, but hurriedly went on. "Found it advisable to go with Edgar Atheling to meet William and offer him the crown. How are you getting on now, my dear?" it continued, turning to Alice as it spoke. "As wet as ever," said Alice in a melancholy tone. "It doesn't seem to dry me at all." "In that case," said the dodo solemnly, rising to its feet, "I move that the meeting adjourn for the immediate adoption of more energetic remedies." "Speak English," said the eaglet. "I don't know the meaning of half those long words, and once more, I don't believe you do either." "What I was going to say," said the dodo in an offended tone, "is that the best thing to get us dry would be a caucus race." "What is a caucus race?" said Alice. "Why," said the dodo, "the best ways to explain it is to do it. First it marked out a race course in a sort of circle, and then all the party were placed along the course, here and there. There was no 1, 2, 3, and away, but they began running when they liked, and left off when they liked, so that it was not easy to know when the race was over. However, when they had been running half an hour or so, and were quite dry again, the dodo suddenly called out, 'The race is over,' and they all crowded round it, panting and asking, 'But who has won?' This question the dodo could not answer without a great deal of thought. At last it said, 'Everybody has won, and all must have prizes.' 'But who is to give the prizes?' quite a chorus of voices asked. 'Why, she, of course,' said the dodo, pointing to Alice with one finger, and the whole party at once crowded round her, calling out, in a confused way, 'Prizes! Prizes?' Alice had no idea what to do, and in despair she put her hand into her pocket and pulled out a box of comfits. Luckily, the salt water had not gotten into it, and handed them round as prizes. There was exactly one apiece all round. The next thing was to eat the comfits. This caused some noise and confusion, as the large birds complained that they could not taste theirs, and the small ones choked and had to be patted on the back. However, it was over at last, and they sat down again in a ring and begged the mouse to tell them something more. "You promised to tell me your history, you know," said Alice. "And why is it you hate C and D?" she added in a whisper, half afraid that it would be offended again. "Mine is a long and sad tale," said the mouse, turning to Alice and sighing. "It is a long tale, certainly," said Alice, looking down with wonder at the mouse's tail. "But why do you call it sad?" And she kept on puzzling about it while the mouse was speaking, so that her idea of the tale was something like this. "Fury said to a mouse that he met in the house, 'Let us both go to law. I will prosecute you. Come out, take no denial. We must have a fair trial. For really, this morning, I've got nothing to do,' said the mouse to the cur. 'Such a trial, dear sir, with no jury or judge, would be wasting our breath. I'll be the judge. I'll be the jury,' said cunning old Fury. 'I'll try the whole cause and condemn you to death.' 'You are not attending,' said the mouse to Alice severely. 'What are you thinking of?' I beg your pardon,' said Alice very humbly. 'You had got to the fifth bend, I think?' 'You insult me by talking such nonsense,' said the mouse, getting up and walking away. 'Please come back and finish your story,' Alice called after it, and the others all joined in chorus. 'Yes, please do.' But the mouse only shook its head impatiently and walked a little quicker. 'I wish I had Dinah, our cat, here,' said Alice. This caused a remarkable sensation among the party. Some of the birds hurried off at once, and a canary called out in a trembling voice to its children, 'Come away, my dears. It's high time you were all in bed.' On various pretexts they all moved off, and Alice was soon left alone. Oh, I wish I hadn't mentioned Dinah. Nobody seems to like her down here, and I'm sure she's the best cat in the world. Poor Alice began to cry again, for she felt very lonely and low-spirited. In a little while, however, she again heard a little pattering of footsteps in the distance, and she looked up eagerly. Chapter 4. The Rabbit Sends in a Little Bill. It was the White Rabbit, trotting slowly back again and looking anxiously about as it went, as if it had lost something. Alice heard it muttering to itself, "Oh, the Duchess, oh, my dear paws, oh, my fur and whiskers, she'll get me executed, as sure as ferrets are ferrets. Where can I have dropped them, I wonder?" Alice guessed in a moment that it was looking for the fan and the pair of white kid gloves, and she very good-naturedly began hunting around for them. But they were nowhere to be seen. Everything seemed to have changed since our swim in the pool, and the great hall, with the glass table and the little door, had vanished completely. Very soon the rabbit noticed Alice, and called to her in an angry tone, "Why, Marianne, what are you doing out here? Run home this moment and fetch me a pair of gloves and a fan. Quick now." "He took me for his housemaid," said Alice, as she ran off. "How surprised he'll be when he finds out who I am." As she said this, she came upon a neat little house, on the door of which was a bright brass plate with the name W. Rabbit engraved upon it. She went in without knocking and hurried upstairs, in great fear lest she should meet the real Marianne and be turned out of the house before she had found the fan and gloves. By this time, Alice had found her way into a tidy little room, with a table in the window, and on it a fan and 2 or 3 pairs of tiny white kid gloves. She took up the fan and a pair of the gloves and was just going to leave the room when her eyes fell upon a little bottle that stood near the looking glass. She uncorked it and put it to her lips, saying to herself, "I do hope it'll make me grow large again. Really, I'm quite tired of being such a tiny little thing." Before she had drunk half the bottle, she found her head pressing against the ceiling, and she had to stoop to save her neck from being broken. She hastily put down the bottle, remarking, "That's quite enough. I hope I shan't grow any more." Alas, it was too late to wish that. She went on growing, and very soon she had to kneel down on the floor. Still she went on growing, and as a last resource, she put one arm out of the window and 1 foot up the chimney, and said to herself, "Now I can do no more, whatever happens. What will become of me?" Luckily for Alice, the little magic bottle had now had its full effect, and she grew no larger. After a few minutes, she heard a voice outside and stopped to listen. "Mary Ann, Mary Ann," said the voice, "fetch me my gloves this moment." Then came a little pattering of feet on the stairs. Alice knew it was the rabbit coming to look for her, and she had trembled until she shook the house, quite forgetting she was now about 1,000 times as large as the rabbit, and had no reason to be afraid of it. Presently, the rabbit came up to the door and tried to open it, but as the door opened inwards and Alice's elbow was pressed hard against it, that attempt proved a failure. Alice heard it say to itself, "Then I'll go round and get in at the window." "That you won't," thought Alice, and after waiting till she fancied she heard the rabbit just under the window, she suddenly spread out her hand and made a snatch in the air. She did not get hold of anything, but she heard a little shriek and a fall and a crash of broken glass, from which she concluded that it was just possible that she had fallen into a cucumber frame or something of that sort. Next came an angry voice, the rabbit's. "Pet, Pet, where are you?" And then a voice she had never heard before. "Sure then, I'm here, digging for apples, Your Honor." "Here, come and help me out of this. Now tell me, Pat, what's that in the window?" "Sure it's an arm, Your Honor." "Well, it's got no business there. At any rate, go and take it away." There was a long silence after this, and Alice could only hear whispers now and then, and at last she spread out her hand again and made another snatch in the air. This time there were 2 little shrieks and more sounds of broken glass. "I wonder what they'll do next," thought Alice. "As for pulling me out of the window, I only wish they could." She waited for some time without hearing anything more. At last came a rumbling of little cartwheels, and the sound of a good many voices all talking together. She made out the words, "Where's the other ladder? Bill's got the other. Bill? Here, Bill. Will the roof bear? Who's to go down the chimney?" "Nay, I shan't. You do it. Here, Bill. The master says you've got to go down the chimney." Alice drew her foot as far down the chimney as she could, and waited till she heard a little animal scratching and scrambling about in the chimney close above her. Then she gave one sharp kick, and waited to see what would happen next. The first thing she heard was a general chorus of, "There goes Bill." Then the rabbit's voice alone, "Jim again, you by the hedge." Then silence and another confusion of voices. "Hold up his head. Brandon now, don't choke him. What happened to you?" Last came a little feeble, squeaking voice. "Well, I hardly know. No more, thank you. I'm better now. All I know is something comes at me like a jack-in-the-box, and a box goes like a skyrocket." After a minute or 2 of silence, they began moving about again, and Alice heard the rabbit say, "A barrow full will do to begin with." "A barrow full of what?" thought Alice. but she had not long to doubt. The next moment, a shower of little pebbles came rattling in at the window, and some of them hit her in the face. Alice noticed, with some surprise, that the pebbles were all turning into little cakes as they lay on the floor, and a bright idea came into her head. If I eat one of these cakes, she thought, it's sure to change some of my size somehow. So she swallowed one of the cakes and was delighted to find that she began shrinking directly. As soon as she was small enough to get through the door, she ran out of the house and found quite a crowd of little animals and birds waiting outside. They all made a rush at Alice the moment she appeared, but she ran off as hard as she could and soon found herself in a thick wood. "The first thing I've got to do," said Alice to herself, as she wandered about in the wood, "is to grow to my right size again. And the second thing is to find my way into that lovely garden. I suppose I ought to eat or drink something or other, but the great question is what?" Alice looked all around her at the flowers and the blades of grass, but she could not see anything that looked like the right thing to eat or drink under the circumstances. There was a large mushroom growing near her, about the same height as herself. She stretched herself up on tiptoe and peeped over the edge, and her eyes immediately met those of a large blue caterpillar, who was sitting on the top, with his arms folded, quietly smoking a long hookah, and taking not the smallest notice of her or of anything else. Gotta take a sip of my tea for the next chapter. One moment. Oh, my bottle's freaking out when I do that. Tasty. Chapter 5. Advice from a Caterpillar. At last, the caterpillar took the hookah out of its mouth and addressed Alice in a languid, sleepy voice. "Who are you?" said the caterpillar. Alice replied rather shyly, I hardly know, sir, just at present. At least, I know who I was when I got up this morning, but I think I must have changed several times since then." "What do you mean by that?" said the caterpillar sternly. "Explain yourself." I can't explain myself, I'm afraid, sir," said Alice, "because I'm not myself, you see. Being so many different sizes in a day is very confusing." She drew herself up and said very gravely, "I think you ought to tell me who you are first." "Why?" said the caterpillar. As Alice could not think of any good reason, and the caterpillar seemed to be in a very unpleasant state of mind, she turned away. "Come back," the caterpillar called after her. "I've something to say." Alice turned and came back again. "Keep your temper," said the caterpillar. "Is that all?" said Alice, swallowing down her anger as well as she could. "No," said the caterpillar. It unfolded its arms, took the hookah out of its mouth again, and said, "So you think you're changed, do you?" "I'm afraid I am, sir," said Alice. "I can't remember things as I used, and I don't keep the same size for 10 minutes together." "What size do you want to be?" asked the caterpillar. "Oh, I'm not particular as to size, Alice hastily replied. Only one doesn't like changing so often, you know. I should like to be a little larger, sir, if you wouldn't mind, said Alice. 3 inches is such a wretched height to be.
It is a very good height indeed,
said the caterpillar angrily, rearing itself upright as it spoke. It was exactly 3 inches high. In a minute or two, the caterpillar got down off the mushroom and crawled away into the grass, merely remarking as it went,
"One side will make you grow taller, and the other side will make you grow shorter."
One side of what? The other side of what? Thought Alice to herself.
Of the mushroom,
Said the caterpillar, just as if she had asked it out loud. In another moment, it was out of sight. Alice remained looking thoughtfully at the mushroom for a minute, trying to make out which were the 2 sides of it. At last she stretched her arms round it as far as they would go, and broke off a bit of the edge with each hand. And now which is which? She said to herself, and nibbled a little of the right-hand bit to try the effect. The next moment she felt a violent blow underneath her chin. It had struck her foot. She was a good deal frightened by this very sudden change, as she was shrieking rapidly. So she set to work at once to eat some of the other bit. Her chin was pressed so closely against her foot that there was hardly room to open her mouth, but she did it at last and managed to swallow a morsel of the left-hand bit. "Come, my head's free at last," said Alice, but all she could see when she looked down was an immense length of her neck, which seemed to rise like a stalk out of a sea of green leaves that lay far below her. "Where have my shoulders got to? And oh, my poor hands, how is it I can't see you?" She was delighted to find that her neck would bend about easily in any direction, like a serpent. She had just succeeded in curving it down into a graceful zigzag, and was going to dive in amongst the leaves, when a sharp hiss made her draw back in a hurry. A large pigeon had flown into her face and was beating her violently with its wings. "Serpent!" cried the pigeon. "I am not a serpent," said Alice indignantly. "Let me alone. I've tried the roots of trees, and I've tried banks, and I've tried hedges," the pigeon went on. "But those serpents, there's no pleasing them." Alice was more and more puzzled. "As if it wasn't trouble enough hatching the eggs," said the pigeon, "but I must be on the lookout for serpents night and day. And just as I'd taken the highest tree in the wood," continued the pigeon, raising its voice to a shriek, "and just as I was thinking I should be free of them at last, they must needs come wriggling from the sky. Serpent!" "But I'm not a serpent, I tell you," said Alice. I'm a little girl," she added rather doubtfully, as she remembered the number of changes she had gone throughout the day. "You're looking for eggs. I know that well enough," said the pigeon. "And what does it matter to me whether you're a little girl or serpent?" "It matters a good deal to me," said Alice hastily, "but I'm not looking for eggs, as it happens, and if I was, I shouldn't want yours. I don't like them raw." "Well, be off then," said the pigeon in a sulky tone, as it settled down again into its nest. Alice crouched down among the trees as well as she could, for her neck kept getting entangled among the branches, and every now and then she had to stop and untwist it. After a while she remembered that she still held the pieces of mushroom in her hands, and she set to work very carefully nibbling first at one and then at the other, and growing sometimes taller and sometimes shorter, until she had succeeded in bringing herself down to her usual height. It was so long since she had been anything near the right size that it felt quite strange at first. The next thing is to get into that beautiful garden. But how is it to be done, I wonder? As she said this, she came suddenly upon an open place with a little house in it about 4 feet high. Whoever lives there, thought Alice, it'll never do to come upon them this size. Why, I should frighten them out of their wits. She did not venture to go near the house till she had brought herself down to 9 inches high. Whew. I'm going to take another sip of tea. It's getting a bit dry. Alright, we're going to do this last chapter. And then I'm probably going to take a bit of an intermission, leave you with the lo-fi. And then after I finish my cup of tea, I'll come back. So, this chapter, break. Then I'll come back. Chapter 6, Pig and Pepper. For a minute or two, she stood looking at the house, when suddenly a footman in livery came running out of the wood. Judging by his face only, she would have called him a fish, and rapped loudly at the door with his fingernails. It was opened by another footman in livery, with a round face and large eyes, like a frog. The fish footman began by producing from under his arms a great letter, and this he handed over to the other, saying in a solemn tone, "For the Duchess, an invitation from the Queen to play croquet." The frog footman repeated, in the same solemn tone, "From the Queen, an invitation for the Duchess to play croquet." Then they both bowed low, and their curls got entangled together. When Alice next peeped out, the fish footman was gone, and the other was sitting on the ground near the door, staring stupidly up into the sky. Alice went timidly up to the door and knocked. "There's no use in knocking," said the footman, "and that for 2 reasons. First, because I'm on the same side of the door as you are. Secondly, because they're making such a noise inside, no one can possibly hear you." And certainly there was a most extraordinary noise going on within, a constant howling and sneezing, and every now and then a great crash, as if a dish or a kettle had been broken to pieces. "How am I to get in?" asked Alice. "Are you to get in at all?" said the footman. "That's the first question, you know." Alice opened the door and went in. The door led right into a large kitchen, which was full of smoke from one end to the other. The Duchess was sitting on a 3-legged stool in the middle, nursing a baby. The cook was leaning over the fire, stirring a large cauldron, which seemed to be full of soup. "There's certainly too much pepper in that soup," Alice said to herself, as well as she could for sneezing. Achoo! Even the Duchess sneezed occasionally, and as for the baby, it was sneezing and howling alternately without a moment's pause. The only 2 creatures in the kitchen that did not sneeze were the cook and a large cat, which was grinning from ear to ear. "Please, would you tell me," said Alice, a little timidly, "why your cat grins like that?" "It's a Cheshire cat," said the Duchess, "and that's why." "I didn't know that Cheshire cats always grinned. In fact, I didn't know that cats could grin, said Alice. You don't know much, said the Duchess, and that's a fact. Just then the cook took the cauldron of soup off the fire and at once set to work throwing everything within her reach at the Duchess and the baby. The fire irons came first, then followed a shower of saucepans, plates, and dishes. Duchess took no notice of them, even when they hit her, and the baby was howling so much already that it was quite impossible to say whether the blows hurt it or not. "Oh, please mind what you're doing," cried Alice, jumping up and down in an agony of terror. "Here, you may nurse it a bit if you'd like," the Duchess said to Alice, flinging the baby at her as she spoke. "I must go and get ready to play croquet with the Queen." And she hurried out of the room. Alice caught the baby with some difficulty, as it was a queer-shaped little creature, and held out its arms and legs in all directions. "If I don't take this child away with me," thought Alice, "they're sure to kill it in a day or two. Wouldn't it be murder to leave it behind?" She said the last words out loud, and the little thing grunted in reply. "If you're going to turn into a pig, my dear," said Alice, "I'll have nothing more to do with you. Mind now." Alice was just beginning to think to herself, "Now, what am I going to do with this creature when I get it home?" when it grunted again so violently that Alice looked down into its face in some alarm. This time there could be no mistake about it. It was neither more nor less than a pig. So she set the little creature down and felt quite relieved to see it trot away quietly into the wood. Alice was a little startled by seeing the Cheshire Cat sitting on a bough of a tree a few yards off. The cat only grinned when it saw her. "Cheshire Puss," began Alice rather timidly, "would you please tell me which way I ought to go from here?" "In that direction," the cat said, waving the right paw around, "lives a hatter, and in that direction," waving the other paw, "lives a March hare. Visit either you like. They're both mad." "But I don't want to go among mad people," Alice remarked. "Oh, you can't help that," said the cat. "We're all mad here. Do you play croquet with the Queen today?" "I should like it very much," said Alice, "but I haven't been invited yet." "You'll see me there," said the cat, and vanished. Alice had not gone much farther before she came in sight of the house of the March Hare. It was so large a house that she did not like to go near it till she had nibbled some more of the left-hand bit of mushroom. And here we've come to chapter 7, and I'm going to take a short intermission, maybe like 15 minutes, and then I'll come back with chapter 7. I'm going to leave you on the intermission screen, and I don't know, enjoy the nice artwork that my friends and fans have done, and I'll see you in 15 minutes. Alright. Hello. Hi everybody. I am back. Your 15-minute intermission and my 15-minute intermission is over. I feel refreshed. I feel good. I put some honey in my tea so that I can read for longer. Because I love this book and I love to share it with people. And I don't know. Yippee. Also, Demon Paimon, I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome. I don't know how long you've been here for, but I saw your little emotes in chat. I saw your little emotes in chat. Okay. Ooh. Slay. Okay. Honestly, it's like 3:30 in the morning, but I'm so committed to this book now. Sleep. We don't know her. We don't know Sleep. Sleep goes to another school. Sleep lives in Canada. Okay. Everyone ready? Everyone buckled in? Everyone tucked up with their little blankets and their pillows and their, I don't know, other things you use to sleep and get comfy? Got your mugs of tea? Yeah. Okay. Chapter 7. A Mad Tea Party. There was a table set out under a tree in front of the house, and the March Hare and the Hatter were having tea at it, a dormouse sitting between them, fast asleep. The table was a large one, but the three were all crowded together at one corner of it. No room, no room, they cried out when they saw Alice coming. There's plenty of room, said Alice indignantly, and she sat down in a large armchair at one end of the table. The Hatter opened his eyes very wide, hearing this, but all he said was, "Why is a Hatter? Why is a raven? Like a writing desk." I'm glad they've begun asking riddles. I believe I can guess that, she added aloud. Do you mean that you'll think you can find the answer to it? Said the March Hare. Exactly so, said Alice. Then you should say what you mean. The March Hare went on. I do, Alice hastily replied. At least I mean what I say. That's the same thing, you know. You might as well just say, added the Dormouse, who seemed to be talking in sleep, that I breathe when I sleep is the same thing as I sleep when I breathe. It is the same thing with you, said the Hatter, as he poured a little hot tea upon its nose. The Dormouse shook its head impatiently and said, without opening its eyes, Of course. Just what I was going to remark myself. Have you guessed the riddle yet? The Hatter said, turning to Alice again. No, I give it up, Alice replied. What's the answer? I haven't the slightest idea, said the Hatter. Nor I, said the March Hare. Alice gave a weary sigh. I think you might do something better with the time, she said, than wasting it in asking riddles that have no answers. Take some more tea, the March Hare said to Alice very earnestly. I've had nothing yet, Alice replied in an offended tone, so I can't take more. You mean you can't take less, said the Hatter. It's very easy to take more than nothing. At this, Alice got up and walked off. The Dormouse fell asleep instantly, and neither of the others took the least notice of her going, though she looked back once or twice. The last time she saw them, they were trying to put the Dormouse into the teapot. At any rate, I'll never go there again, said Alice, as she picked her way through the wood. It's the stupidest tea party I ever was at in all my life. Just as she said this, she noticed that one of the trees had a door leading right into it. That's very curious, she thought. I think I may as well go in at once. And in she went. Once more she found herself in the long hall and close to the little glass table. Taking the little golden key, she unlocked the door that led into the garden. Then she set to work nibbling at the mushroom. She had kept a piece of it in her pocket, till she was about a foot high. Then she walked down the little passage, and then she found herself at last in the beautiful garden, among the bright flower beds and the cool fountains. Chapter 8. The Queen's Croquet Ground. A large rose tree stood near the entrance of the garden. The roses growing on it were white, but there were 3 gardeners at it, busily painting them red. Suddenly, their eyes chanced to fall upon Alice. She stood, watching them. "Would you tell me, please," said Alice, a little timidly, "why you are painting the roses?" 5 and 7 said nothing, but looked at 2. 2 began in a low voice.
"Why, the fact is, you see, miss, this here ought to have been a red rose tree, and we put a white one in by mistake. And if the Queen was to find out, we should all have our heads cut off, you know. So you see, miss, we're doing our best, before she comes, to..."
At this moment, 5, who had been anxiously looking across the garden, called out,
"The Queen! The Queen!"
and the 3 gardeners instantly threw themselves flat upon their faces. There was a sound of many footsteps, and Alice looked round, eager to see the Queen. First came 10 soldiers carrying clubs, with their hands and feet at the corners, next to the 10 courtiers. These were ornamented all over with diamonds. After these came the royal children. There were 10 of them, all ornamented with hearts. Next came the guests, mostly kings and queens, and among them Alice recognized the White Rabbit. Then followed the Knave of Hearts, carrying the king's crown on a crimson velvet cushion. And last of all, this grand procession, came the King and the Queen of Hearts. When the procession came opposite to Alice, they all stopped and looked at her, and the Queen said severely,
"Who is this?"
She said it to the Knave of Hearts, who only bowed and smiled in reply. "My name is Alice, so please, your Majesty," said Alice very politely, but she added to herself, "Why, they're only a pack of cards after all."
"Can you play croquet?"
said the Queen. This question was evidently meant for Alice. "Yes," said Alice loudly.
"Come on, then,"
roared the Queen. It's a very fine day," said a timid voice to Alice. She was walking by the White Rabbit, who was peeping anxiously into her face. "Very," said Alice. "Where's the Duchess?" "Hush, hush," said the Rabbit. "She's under the sentence of execution." "What for?" said Alice. "She boxed the Queen's ears," the Rabbit began. "Get to your places," shouted the Queen in a voice of thunder, and people began running about in all directions, tumbling up against each other. However, they got settled down in a minute or 2, and the game began. Alice thought she had never seen such a curious croquet ground in all her life. It was all ridges and furrows. The croquet balls were live hedgehogs, and the mallets live flamingos, and the soldiers had to double themselves up and stand on their hands and feet to make the arches. The players all played at once, without waiting for turns, quarreling all the while and fighting for the hedgehogs. And in a very short time, the Queen was in a furious passion and went stamping about and shouting, "Off with his head!" or "Off with her head!" about once in a minute. They're dreadfully fond of beheading people here, thought Alice. The great wonder is that there's anyone left alive. She was looking about for some way of escape, but she noticed a curious appearance in the air. It's the Cheshire Cat, she said to herself. Now I shall have somebody to talk to. How are you getting on? Said the cat. I don't think they play it all fairly, Alice said, in a rather complaining tone. And they all quarrel so dreadfully, one can't hear oneself speak. And they don't seem to have any rules in particular. How do you like the Queen? Said the cat, in a low voice. Not at all, said Alice. Alice thought she might as well go back and see how the game was going on. So she went off in search of her hedgehog. The hedgehog was engaged in a fight with another hedgehog, which seemed to Alice an excellent opportunity for croqueting one of them with the other. The only difficulty was that her flamingo was gone across to the other side of the garden, where Alice could see it trying, in a helpless sort of way, to fly up into a tree. She caught the flamingo and tucked it away under her arm, that it might not escape again. Just then, Alice ran across the Duchess, who was now out of prison. She tucked her arm affectionately into Alice's, and they walked off together. Alice was very glad to find her in such a pleasant temper. She was a little startled, however, when she heard the voice out of the Duchess close to her ear.
You're thinking about something, my dear, and that makes you forget to talk.
The game's going on rather better now, Alice said, by way of keeping up the conversation a little.
'Tis so, said the Duchess, and the moral of that is, oh, 'tis love that makes the world go round.
Somebody said, Alice whispered, that it's done by everybody minding his own business.
Well, it means much the same thing, said the Duchess, digging her sharp little chin into Alice's shoulder, as she added, and the moral of that is, take care of the scents, and the sounds will take care of themselves.
To Alice's great surprise, the Duchess's arm that was linked into hers began to tremble. Alice looked up, and there stood the Queen in front of them, with her arms folded, frowning like a thunderstorm.
Now I give you fair warning, shouted the Queen, stamping on the ground as she spoke. Either you or your head must be off, and in that about half no time. Take your choice.
The Duchess took her choice, and was gone in a moment.
Let's go on with the game,
the Queen said to Alice, and Alice was much too frightened to say a word, but slowly followed her back to the croquet ground. All the time they were playing, the Queen never left off quarreling with the other players and shouting, "Off with his head," or "Off with her head." By the end of half an hour or so, all the players except the King, the Queen, and Alice were in custody of the soldiers and under sentence of execution. Then the Queen left off, quite out of breath, and walked away with Alice. Alice heard the King say in a low voice to the company generally, "You are all pardoned." Suddenly the cry, "The trial's beginning!" was heard in the distance, and Alice ran along with the others. Chapter 9. Who stole the tarts? The King and Queen of Hearts were seated on their throne when they arrived, with a great crowd assembled about them. All sorts of little birds and beasts, as well as the whole pack of cards. The knave was standing before them, in chains, with a soldier on each side to guard him. And near the king was the White Rabbit, with a trumpet in one hand and a scroll of parchment in the other. In the middle of the court was a table, with a large dish of tarts upon it. I wish they'd get the trial done, Alice thought, and hand round the refreshments. The judge, by the way, was the king, and he wore his crown over his great wig. That's the jury box, thought Alice. And those 12 creatures, some were animals and some were birds, I suppose they are the jurors. Just then, the White Rabbit cried out, "Silence in the court!" "Herald, read the accusation," said the king. On this, the White Rabbit blew 3 blasts on the trumpet, bum, 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 and then unrolled the parchment scroll and read as follows. "The Queen of Tarts, she made some tarts, all on a summer's day. The Knave of Hearts, he stole these tarts and took them quite away." "Call the first witness," said the king, and the White Rabbit blew 3 blasts on the trumpet, bum, 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 and called out, "First witness." The first witness was the Hatter. He came in with a teacup in one hand and a piece of bread and butter in the other. "You ought to have finished," said the king. "When did you begin?" The Hatter looked at the March Hare, who had followed him into the court, arm in arm with the Dormouse. 14th of March, I think it was." "Give your evidence," said the king, "and don't be nervous, or I'll have you executed on the spot." This did not seem to encourage the witness at all. He kept shifting from one foot to the other, looking uneasily at the queen, and in his confusion he bit out a large piece of his teacup instead of the bread and butter. Just at this moment, Alice felt a very curious sensation. She was beginning to grow larger again. The miserable Hatter dropped his teacup and bread and butter and went down on one knee. "I'm a poor man, your majesty," he began. "You're a very poor speaker," said the king. "You may go," said the king, and the Hatter hurriedly left the court. "Call the next witness," said the king. The next witness was the Duchess's cook. She carried the pepper box in her hand, and the people near the door began sneezing all at once. "Give your evidence," said the king.
"Shan't,"
said the cook. The king looked anxiously at the White Rabbit, who said in a low voice, "Your Majesty must cross-examine this witness." "Well, if I must, I must," the king said. "What are tarts made of?"
"Pepper, mostly,"
said the cook. For some minutes the whole court was in a confusion, and by the time they had settled down again, the cook had disappeared. "Never mind," said the king. "Call the next witness." Alice watched the White Rabbit as he fumbled over the list. Imagine her surprise when he read out, at the top of his shrill little voice, the name Alice. Chapter 10. Alice's Evidence. "Here," cried Alice. She jumped up in such a hurry that she tipped over the jury box, upsetting all the jurymen on the heads of the crowds below. "Oh, I beg your pardon," she exclaimed in a tone of great dismay. "The trial cannot proceed," said the king, "until all the jurymen are back in their proper places. All," he repeated with great emphasis, looking hard at Alice. "What do you know about this business?" the king said to Alice. "Nothing whatsoever," said Alice. The king then read from his book. "Rule 42. All persons more than a mile high to leave the court."
"I'm not a mile high," said Alice. "Nearly 2 miles high,"
said the queen. "Well, I shan't go, at any rate," said Alice. The king turned pale and shut his notebook hastily. "Consider your verdict," he said to the jury in a low, trembling voice. "There's more evidence to come yet, please your majesty," said the White Rabbit, jumping up in a great hurry. "This paper has just been picked up. It seems to be a letter written by the prisoner to somebody." He unfolded the paper as he spoke and added, "It isn't a letter, after all, it's a set of verses."
"Please, your majesty,"
said the knave.
I didn't write it, and they can't prove that I did. There's no name signed at the end.
You must have meant some mischief, or else you'd have signed your name like an honest man, said the king. There was a general clapping of hands at this. Read them, he added, turning to the White Rabbit. There was dead silence in the court while the White Rabbit read aloud the verses. That's the most important piece of evidence we've heard yet, said the king. I don't believe there's an atom of meaning in it, ventured Alice. If there's no meaning in it, said the king, that saves a world of trouble, you know, as we needn't try to find any. Let the jury consider their verdict.
No, no, said the queen. Sentence first, verdict afterwards.
Stuff and nonsense, said Alice loudly. The idea of having the sentence first.
Hold your tongue,
said the queen, turning purple. I won't, said Alice.
Oh, boy, that head,
said the queen at the top of her voice. Nobody moved. Who cares for you, said Alice. She had grown to her full size by this point. You're nothing but a pack of cards. At this, the whole pack rose up in the air and came flying down upon her. She gave a little scream, half of fright and half of anger, and tried to beat them off, and found herself lying on the bank with her head in the lap of her sister, who was gently brushing away some dead leaves that had fluttered down from the trees upon her face. Hi, thank you so much for the follow. Wake up, Alice, dear, said her sister. Why, what a long sleep you've had. Oh, I've had such a curious dream, said Alice. And she told her sister, as well as she could remember them, all these strange adventures of hers that you have just been reading about.
That I have just been reading about.
Alice got up and ran off, thinking while she ran, as well she might, what a wonderful dream it had been. End of the book. Yay! Yay! We did it! We did it! I don't remember the book being that short. Also, I think this version of the book fully, completely did not have the mock turtle in it, which is something I didn't know about. That was very interesting. Which edition was this? I'm not sure. This might have been the original edition. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Alright. Do we want another story? I can do another story if we so want. I've got all day. But if we don't want another story, then I could do something else. I've got a bunch of fairy tales here. I've got a bunch like written up. Oh, we're not written up. I didn't write them. But I've got a lot that were we just finished reading Alice in Wonderland. So right now we don't currently have anything. We have the Yellow Fairy book by Andrew Lang up next on the docket, if you will. It's got a bunch of small, it's kind of like Think Brothers Grimm, except it's all of the stories from everywhere. It's a bunch of fairy tales from a bunch of different countries. I was gonna read The Six Swans. Six Swans is one of my personal favorites. We can also do The Glass Mountain, The Magic Ring, The Flying Ship, The Hazelnut Child. There's like a bunch. Do we want to read one of those fairy tales? Or we could read something funny. I don't know if it would fit the vibe. I don't know if it would feel very bedtime story. But if I read it in a bedtime story enough voice, we could read something funny. We could read something really funny. Like, I mean, I want to just read whatever you guys want to hear. So, I mean, if we're gonna read a fairy tale, I'll probably start with the Six Swans. But if no one, if people are done with the fairy tales, I can read something funny. Your guys' choice. Whatever you want. I live to please. I live to read. I'm just a little, I'm just your little narrator here. Is it night or morning for you? Oh, that depends on your point of view. That depends on your point of view. It's where I am. It's currently about 4 in the morning. So technically, if we're being technical about it, it is the beginning of Friday. But 4 a.m. is also nighttime. So, your point of view. But also, I woke up at like 7 p.m. So, it's like the middle of my day. I'm a very nocturnal being. Let's get some laughs. Oh, we love some laughs. All right. Let me get something up. Hold on. Ooh. Yeah. We could do that. Or okay. Hold on. I'm gonna pull up a couple. Pull up a couple different options, and then I'll give you all the titles that we could do. And I will let you choose. Hold on 1 second. All right. Got that option, and then last but not least. Got that, and then yep. Nope. Maybe I can search it up. Bum. Oh boy. Not me forgetting. My own. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Not me trying like 6 different passwords. It's fine. Don't worry about it. And where's my... I feel like you guys aren't holding your horses. Guys, please, your horses. They need to be held or they'll start running away. Guys, no, your horses. Look at them go. Oh, they're escaping. You gotta catch them. You gotta catch your horses. I can see them running away down the hills. Oh no. Oh no. No, not the horses. No. There it is. Okay. Found it. I found it. Okay. So, we have 3 options. We have 3 funny, teehee little options. Actually, I lied. We might have 2 options. I think I can't. Oh, I think this page is broken. Oh, that's so upsetting. Okay, we have 2 options. I lied. We have 2 options. Okay. So I keep these tabbed in my I keep them tapped in my browser because this was the running bit on my friend's channel. That whenever he was streaming and he would go take like a bathroom break or a food break, I would entertain his stream while, he was off doing whatever he needed to do. And I would read cringy fan fiction. That's what I would do. I would read cringy fan fiction to his chat. And that was our running bit. So we have two cringy fan fictions. Okay, one of them's less cringy. It's just like old. But one of them is super cringy. So our two options are okay, we've got Down into the Fires of Hell, parentheses, a Soul Eater X Fairy Tale crossover. Or we have Drowning in a Breath of Fresh Air. The first one is the cringy one, is the really crazy cringy one, which is, there's really no way to explain it. It's crazy. It's actually insane. It's like a self-insert, but it's also like a dimension hopper fic. It's so, oh my god, it's crazy. The description for it is Satan's daughter gets fed up with her, quote, pampered life and decides to go to her favorite anime. But when her dimension skipping powers glitch, where will she really end up? Will she fix her powers and go home? Or will she fall in love with a certain pink-haired dragon slayer? What if another boy comes into her life? Will a Kemi Reaper ever want to go home again? And then the other one. The other one is the more serious one. But it's also funny because it is a Naruto isekai. It's a Kakashi Hatake slash original female character Naruto isekai. And within the first couple of paragraphs, it just says some crazy stuff. Like I can't really spoil it for you. It's just crazy. So which one do we want? Do we want the ultra cringy Soul Eater slash fairy tale slash other things one? Or do we want the Naruto isekai? What do we want? What do we want to see? Both sound so good. I mean, hey, here's the thing, is I can read both. Which one do we want to start with, though? Because, hey, I have all the time in the world. We can read both. But which one do we want to set the vibe? Naruto. Send it. Alright. Let's start with the Naruto one. Perfect, 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 perfect. Oh, this is gonna be so fun. Oh, guys, this is gonna be so fun. Hold on. I gotta put my hair up for this. I gotta get it out of the way. Alright. Are you ready? Okay. Actually, wait. Do we want to hear the tags, or do we just want to raw dog it? Because the tags. No. You know what? Let's raw dog it. You know what? Let's just send it. Let's send it. Okay. Chapter 1. The beginning. The funny thing about dying, Alice figured. Oh, by the way, main character's name. Oh my god, this works perfectly. We just finished Alice in Wonderland. Main character's name is Alice. Funny thing about dying, Alice figured, was that it wasn't quite as meticulous as all the major religions she'd encountered in her life seemed to say. There were no shadowy figures wielding scythes in her final moments, or a gateway into paradise, or even the parallel elevators going up and down her friend had once theorized about on a hazy summer night. No, it was more like a sort of existential blip. One moment, she was trapped under the crushing weight of water filling her lungs, and the next, she was in a dark and cramped space. The blip in between was that of a pure sort of nothingness, where she supposed it felt a bit like the power was going out in her entire being for a very brief millisecond. All in all, dying wasn't a very comfortable thing. It wasn't uncomfortable, but if given the chance, she would really much rather be alive than whatever this place was. It was rather dark and warm, and she felt like she was under too many heavy blankets right in the middle of July. If she could sweat, she would have. Then, all of a sudden, Alice was quite literally pushed into an infinitely more uncomfortable position than before. The heat was more intense, and she felt distinctly like a bottle of ketchup that was just being squeezed for that very last squeeze of tasty tomato juice. She regretted any complaints she had made earlier. This was much worse, and she would like to go back to how it was before. Thank you very much. The process of being painfully squeezed and squished around like some sort of sick stress ball continued for quite a long time. Not the bottle of ketchup. Just you wait. The process of being painfully squeezed and squished around like some sort of sick stress ball continued for quite a long time, and the buzzing energy from the strange and frankly nerve-wracking sensation only grew as she went through what seemed to be an even smaller and tighter part of the darkness. Oh no. The fit was difficult, and she tried to make herself as small as possible to make the process hopefully go faster. Unluckily for her, it took quite a long time, and only made her internal panicked screaming that much louder. Then it was over. She veritably popped out of whatever hellish place she had just come from, into a brighter and even worse place. It was bright and loud, and her skin was screaming from the feeling of other hands touching her, and she couldn't breathe, and naturally, as soon as she could find a breath, she tossed it back out into the world with a scream. She was screaming and crying, and she honestly kind of just wanted to go back to being bad, because this was infinitely worse than drowning. At least drowning was silent and peaceful at the end. Voices. I can't. Hey man. Who describes being birthed as being squeezed, like being a ketchup bottle being squeezed? That's crazy. Okay.
Where was I? Oh, voices rumbled around her, and her poor sensitive ears were at last coming to terms with their surroundings, because the noise made her want to scream marginally less as each lengthy second passed. Those cold hands from before picked her up, and very distantly she wondered what on earth possessed hands so large as to pick up a grown woman, and she was passed on to another, slightly smaller set of hands. These hands were warm and sweaty, but oh so gentle, as they pressed her up against something soft and equally as warm. A soft thudding registered in her ears and resonated throughout her body, and as she counted the regular beats, she came to a stunning and profound realization that immediately cut off her crying. Ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. A heartbeat. She was hearing a heartbeat. Then, suddenly, other factors started to hit her in fast succession as her overstimulated senses started to clear up a bit, and she calmed down. Big hands, too big, holding her. Loud voices that boomed impossibly large. A heartbeat, steady and way too loud. Pushing, pulling, dark space. White walls and the tangy scent of sweat mixed with cleaning supplies. Alice's heart thudded a little too fast for what she now realized was a body. Too small, that she shouldn't have. No. Suddenly, the blip after her death seemed to make so much more sense. Terrible sense. The facts were undeniable, and sue her if she became a little upset by the revelation. She was, in fact, a freshly birthed baby. She started screaming again. I love this thing, oh my god. Okay, and then there's like a line break, so. In Alice's personal and professional opinion, being a baby was no fun, frustrating, and so incredibly boring that she finally understood why babies cried all the time. There was nothing to do except eat, sleep, and mournfully wait until she had some sort of higher functioning power to utilize. What was especially infuriating was that wherever she was born seemed to speak a language that vaguely resembled archaic Japanese, so she couldn't even understand most of the things her parents said to her. Back before she died, she had taken a year of Japanese in high school to fulfill the foreign language requirement to graduate. But now she found herself wishing she had at least further pursued it into college. Her very meager Japanese helped her understand basic travel phrases as well as counting, but beyond that she was supremely lost. Her first 2 months of babyhood passed pretty easily, despite the fact that she hated it in this place. It was nothing personal against her new parents, but being a baby was infinitely worse than being dead. And she would like to go back to blissful oblivion now, thank you very much. At least when you're dead, you don't shit yourself and get manhandled at all hours of the day, she thought. So that's a plus point towards death. Her parents were kind people, they really were, and she felt bad for hating every aspect of the life they were trying to give her. They were probably new parents, going off of their youthful faces and the fact that she didn't really see any other kids running around the house. She feared that they could have a kid out of the house already, but that seemed very unlikely considering the fact that they just looked so young. They really couldn't have been older than their mid-20s, not too far off from Alice's own age when she died.
It was uncomfortable to think that people so close to her old age were already having children. Were they responsible enough? She'd be fine, right? A line break. 2 months and 12 days into her new life, something pretty strange happened. It was a balmy summer night. At least, she assumed it was summer, since it was just so hot all the time. And Alice was in the middle of getting fed by her mom. Her dad took it upon himself to tiredly hover nearby as he waited for her mom to come back to bed. That was something she had learned in her time in this household. No matter what, both of her parents would be awake within moments of the other when she cried in the middle of the night. They both seemed to be extraordinarily light sleepers, and if one of them was busy settling her down, she had noticed that the other would refuse to go back to sleep until their spouse had finished and made to go back to bed themselves. It didn't seem very consistent with what she knew about parents and how they worked with new babies before she had died, but she rolled with it and shrugged it off as a particular quirk of her new parents. On this balmy summer night, 3 things happened to Alice before she could even blink in surprise. 1. A man appeared at the window, dressed in all black, with a white mask painted to look like some kind of ferociously snarling animal, covering his face. 2. Her dad slid in between the man and his family protectively, pulling some sort of diamond-shaped knife from somewhere in his vicinity. 3. Her mom, a half heartbeat slower than her dad, twisted her body so she shielded Alice from the view of the window. Then everything was very, very still, as blood pounded in Alice's ears and her breath caught in her throat. The tension in the room was so palpable she was choking on it, so she did the only thing her vocal cords were really capable of at this stage of development and cried. This seemed to break the momentary standoff between her parents and the man, as everybody relaxed a little bit. Not fully, mind you. She could still feel the activated muscles of her mother's biceps curling around Alice's tiny body. Her father put away the knife. He had been keeping it on the nightstand, and her mother returned to her stance, to her previous position, as her father stepped forward to open the window. He exchanged a few words with the animal mask man and accepted a stout green-edged scroll from him. Alice was pondering why a scroll, of all methods of information, when the masked man literally just disappeared. One moment he was perched as pretty as you please on the windowsill, and in the next he was just gone. Something about the masked man seemed wildly familiar in her mind, but she didn't have time to dwell on it as her mother started to exchange hushed words with her father. Alice didn't know why they were keeping their voices down. It wasn't like she could understand them. Her mother's melodic voice was tense and frustrated, but her father's deep timbre sounded rather sorrowful in return, which didn't quite match up with his white-knuckled grip on the scroll or the worried pinch in his brows. He sounded so sad, and was even a little resigned if his tense shoulders and slumped posture were in any way indicative of his words. Her mother tightened her grip on Alice, stepped forward to hug her husband as close as she could with one remaining free arm. Her dad clutched her back tightly and leaned down to press a kiss to Alice's temple before stepping away and towards the closet. Her mother watched him pull clothes and scrolls similar to the one he was holding out of the closet for a long moment before she left the room and entered the nursery with Alice still tightly held in her arms. As soon as the nursery door clicked shut behind them, she felt, more than heard, her mother take a very deep breath and exhale shakily. Whatever the thing going on with the masked man and the scroll was, it seemed pretty upsetting for her, and Alice suddenly felt a rush of sympathy for this young new mother. As she was gently settled back down into her cushy sunflower-patterned crib sheets, she finally caught a sight of her mother's expression and felt her heart drop through her feet. Scared, so scared. Her frightened expression cleared up when she saw Alice watching her intently, and a smile rose up to replace the tangled web of emotions that had shaken her normally sunny countenance. It wasn't quite right. It wasn't her real smile. Alice knew that for certain. Her mom's real smile was wide and warm, with a dimple at either side of her full-lipped mouth, and her eyes crinkled sweetly at the corners when she laughed. This smile didn't quite reach her eyes, and she looked too tired for such a young face. Alice's skin buzzed, and her mouth felt dry. What was that exchange earlier if it had gotten her mom so scared and worked up? Was her dad in trouble? Was it the Mafia? Or rather, the Yakuza? Alice fell asleep fitfully that night. Her heart worried over if her family was going to be broken up before she even got to say her first words. Line break. Her dad disappeared for a whole 2 weeks after that crazy night, with each day that passed causing both Alice and her mom to grow more and more worried. Alice's skin buzzed almost constantly as restless and relentless worry built up in her, wondering if that night had been her last with her dad. She didn't want him gone. He was too young. She was too young. He was sweet and funny, and he read her stories that she couldn't make heads or tails of when she started to get a little bored in the afternoons. He always seemed to know when she was feeling restless, and he would play with her until the buzzing settled down again. She would even miss his stupid, offensively orange hair and how scratchy his goatee was when he kissed her forehead before bed. She spent days and days like this, convinced her dad was dead or kidnapped by the Yakuza, before the man came again, for her and her mom this time. He showed up while Alice was sitting in her horrible, and this is capitalized, horrible and infuriating high chair. One afternoon, appearing in the kitchen window in the same creepy manner as last time. Alice wasn't very proud of her reaction, but she may have screamed. Quite loudly. In a lot of fear. I mean, sue her, okay? She didn't want to be baby snatched by the Japanese mafia, whether or not that was an actual thing that the mafia did. She didn't think her new parents were rich or powerful enough to warrant actual child snatching, but she wasn't taking any chances. At the sound of her scream, her mom appeared looking frenzied and holding another of those diamond knives. Seriously, what was up with those things? As she scanned for the danger to her baby. Seeing the masked man, her entire body went rigid, and the overwhelming fear from that night flitted briefly across her face before her expression settled into an impressive version of a still lake. Privately, Alice thought that this horrible blankness was even worse than the fear. As she tucked the knife back into the kangaroo pocket of her apron, Alice noticed with keen eyes that her mother's hands were faintly trembling. Her mother shakily opened the window for the man, and at a few words from him, she was already bundling up Alice and heading for the door faster than Alice could say, well, anything. She was a 2.5-month-old baby. She didn't really have a comprehensive grasp on language yet. She moved quickly and with long strides down side streets and alleys, clearly going through some sort of shortcut to get to their destination. Alice could tell from the tight way that her mother gripped her that something was definitely going on, and Alice really hoped her mom wasn't going to go fight the Yakuza to avenge her husband. Alice could totally respect the avenging part, just not the whole fighting with the scary Japanese mafia bit. If she was already going to lose one parent to the whims of the Yakuza, she didn't really want to lose both of them. As her mother speed walked to their destination, Alice realized this was actually the first time she had been outside since they brought her home after she was born. And boy, oh boy, was that still her number one in the top 10 supremely horrible memories her new life had given her so far. And number 2 was getting her dad Yakuza snatched. The town they lived in was rather nice and didn't smell like pollution, like the major city Alice had grown up in had smelled like nothing but rotten garbage and diesel fumes. The air here was fresh and crisp. She liked the feeling of the fresh air in her lungs, even though the sun beating down from the sky was brutally hot, even for supposed summer. As they traversed the decidedly maze-like streets and side alleys, Alice started to get an acute sense of déjà vu. There was a memory of sorts in the very back corners of her mind that was just waiting to be remembered. The winding streets were so familiar in certain places, and she could swear that she had seen that shop that was selling the squishy and brightly colored dumplings before somewhere. Even the older storefronts looked achingly familiar, like the flower shop they passed that was positively bursting with colorful flora out the wazoo. She keenly wished she could read as they sped past the marketplace, because the itch of nostalgia needed to be scratched the way that one mosquito bite you can't quite reach needs to be scratched. By then, it was deeply annoying. It kind of felt like building a convoluted picture puzzle, and Alice was sure she had all of the edge pieces of this weird memory mystery clicked together, but without those key centerpieces, she had no idea what was really going on. The weird deja vu immediately slipped from her mind when they finally reached their destination and went inside, though. A hospital. They had gone to a hospital. As far as she knew, there was nothing wrong with her or her mom. So why were they at a hospital? A hospital didn't seem like a place the Yakuza would hang out either. So why were they here? And why did she have a bad feeling about this? I wonder why. And you're not gonna find out, because I'm gonna go put you guys on. Be right back, because I'm gonna go to the bathroom. But you'll find out soon. I'll get to the second chapter in a second. Be right back. BRB. And we're back. And we're back. Okay. Now we're about to find out what's gonna happen. Oh my god. Chapter 2. The Revelation. In which Alice finally realizes what's going on, learns a bit about her chakra, and hatches a master plan. From her position bundled up in her mom's arms, Alice couldn't see much of the waiting room while her mom spoke in quick and hushed words to the tired woman at the main desk. All she could see from her limited vantage point was a few men and women who were wearing green vests and seemed to be bleeding profusely. Alice, yes, they seemed to be bleeding profusely from various different kinds of violent wounds. One woman with dark hair and darker eyes she could see beyond her mom's shoulder had a sword stuck through the meat of her leg. She looked completely calm and even somewhat bored with the situation. Scratch that, she thought, watching the woman's expression tighten minutely as she shifted her stance to favor the uninjured leg. She's just really good at hiding the fact that it probably hurts a lot. As Alice peered around her mother's arms, her throat felt dry as an idea started to come to her. A tiny voice in her head told her that this wasn't normal at all for a hospital waiting room, and that she should know why. Normal hospital waiting rooms didn't feature such casual, violent injuries going untreated and without concern unless there was a total overload of violently injured patients. Again, the thought was fully dropped from her mind when her mom started moving again. Walking quickly towards the stairs, sitting behind the thick yellow line on the floor that divided the waiting room from the main hospital. They passed doctors and the occasional nurse in the halls, but Alice wasn't paying too much attention to them, as she tried to get a look at her mom's face to gauge how much she should be worrying. The answer she got was very much. Very, very much. There wasn't a lot to see from her angle, but she could tell her mom was extremely worried from the tense muscles she could feel in the arms holding her. Then, as they broke through another corridor and turned into an open room, she could finally see what had her mom so distressed. It was her dad! Oh no! It was her dad. He was lying down in a hospital bed with a handful of those diamond knives lying innocently in a bloody tray next to him on the sheets. Two other men were sitting at his bedside, one with a big gray dog resting its head on his thighs, and the other with an eye patch over his right eye. The two men looked worse for wear and bone-tired, but at the sight of her mom, they both stood up and started talking at her in rushed words, overlapping each other as they spoke in the way that only close friends or siblings could. Alice couldn't make out what they were saying from how fast they were talking, and also because she didn't know what they were saying, but she took the time to stare at them instead as the centerpieces of the puzzle that was just the past few weeks started to snap into place. Green vests with little red swirls sewn on the back. Knives shaped like diamonds and covered in blood. The man with the painted white mask at the window. The number of violent injuries in the hospital waiting room. Her eyes suddenly drifted to her dad, who was looking at her mom and her with a smile that revealed both his tired relief and a deep love for both of them in the soft curve of his upturned lips. The very last piece of the puzzle clicked satisfyingly into place as she looked at him in horror. Not horror. Oh, horror. No, not like this. a blue strip of cloth with a metal plate attached, the stylized image of a leaf engraved proudly on the scuffed but well loved surface. A leaf, kunai, anbu,
Shinobi.
she recognized all of these things. She was absolutely sure by now that the place she currently lived was none other than the village hidden in the leaves, Konohagakure. So many different small things made sense now. Her dad's orange but apparently natural hair. The reason he left a newborn baby and his wife for weeks on end. We in it, we're here. For weeks on end. The way her parents had reacted to the Anbu the night her dad left, and a dozen other things fell neatly into place. And she felt a little stricken over the fact that she hadn't seen it before. Date Bayo, indeed! And she felt a little stricken over the fact that she hadn't seen it before. This really was. This really was the world she had obsessed over into late hours of the night, written and read fan fiction about, and even comprehensively timelined back in the time before her death. Distantly, Alice was aware that she was staring at her dad and hyperventilating. But she couldn't stop the massive rush of feelings and thoughts hurtling and swirling around in her head at the moment. Oh my gosh, it's crazy, it's crazy. There were panicked voices, and she could hear her dad's deep rumble through them all, speaking words that had the two men at his bedside rushing out of the room as her mother tried to rock her gently and rub her back in soothing circles. She focused on the feeling of a large hand on her tiny back and let it ground her as she forcefully pushed all thoughts of Ninja and Naruto aside and filed them away for, and this is capitalized, another day's consideration. She slowly but surely fell into a more natural breathing rhythm, comforted by the feeling of her mom behind her. It was nice. It was warm. Her slight panic attack left her feeling tired and weak, and she really just wanted a nap. So she lifted her tiny fists and waved them weakly at her dad to be held. Oh. Her dad looked torn as he looked down at his bloody flak jacket and back at her, but her mom just laughed and held Alice out to him with a few melodic words. He took her in his slightly bloody arms, definitely getting her nice baby dress ruined and warranting another bath when she got home, and held her close to his chest with a big smile that reached from ear to ear in honest joy. It was at this point that the two men from before bustled back in with a nurse, but at the sight of Alice being held by her dad, they lost the panic in their eyes and relaxed. The nurse came forward and held up glowing green hands to her. However, making her shut her eyes so she wouldn't have another panic attack at this display of chakra use, which was wild in itself because chakra? It's basically magic. And if Alice could use magic, then she could do anything with enough control and big enough reserves if the diagrams in the Naruto manga were to be believed. That much power was slightly mind-boggling in and of itself, but she would have to learn to live with it if it was the new norm. Line break. Au-dessus les six paths. No, literally. Her dad was cleared to go home by the doctor that evening. The biological recovery period of being stabbed several times in the abdomen greatly decreased for the chakra-wielding nurses that had come to patch up her dad's injuries. which was doubly wild because a stabbing only warranted nurses to treat the injuries. No fuss, no muss, no surgery, she guessed. Medical ninja were probably the only reason a shinobi world was actually sustainable enough to build the economy off of ninja villages. Without speedy recovery, there would be no ninja left, and then where would the world be? Stuck in the medieval ages, probably. Chakra was interesting, though. It was nighttime again, and Alice was stuck in her crib as she mulled over what she remembered about chakra from capital B before. As far as she was aware, it was kind of like blood, in the way that her body couldn't survive without a minimum level of it present in her system, which explained a chakra exhaustion. I mean, people who just suddenly run out of blood have to sit around in the hospital with transfusions until they replenish blood on their own, so why would chakra be any different, she thought. If she was going to run any chakra experiments in the future, she would have to be careful about keeping a watchful eye on her supply. The first step then would just be to find her chakra. If she could find it, she could watch it, and then she could study it. It wasn't as hard to find her chakra as she thought it would have been. The constant low level of buzzing in her skin helping her pinpoint the exact origins of the energy. Finding it wasn't the issue. Being constantly aware of it was. When she was aware of her chakra, the feeling of it flowing through her was very uncomfortable. It was like suddenly being aware of an extra organ, or realizing that your tongue didn't quite fit in your mouth. Now that she had felt it, Alice wondered how she could have ever missed it. It was like touching a very weak live wire, minimal electricity traveling through and exploring her musculature. She could feel the restlessly buzzing energy pool at certain places before it moved on, collecting in her chest and joints before trickling in a circular motion back to where it started. The way the chakra in her body itched and squirmed made her wonder if there was a period that babies from this universe go through, like teething, but with chakra. It was uncomfortable, it ached. She felt sore and cranky, and she just wanted to rewind time to back before she went looking for her own chakra. She was constantly aware of it after that, spending her days getting more and more annoyed as the energy grew stronger and stronger. At points it felt so strong that it was a wonder her few wisps of hair weren't standing on end. She wondered how her parents couldn't see the low-level discomfort she was undergoing daily. Eventually, this annoyance evolved into true irritation, and she cried more and more in frustration as she wished for a way to just turn it off. It was when she was 3 months old that Alice accidentally figured out how to relieve the buzzing under her skin. It was nighttime, as most of her recent major life events seemed to unanimously agree was the prime time for discovery. And it was a day where her chakra was being, capitals, annoying, and capitals, persistent. As she lay in her crib, unable to just go to sleep, she had a sudden thought. She remembered another time where her skin had been buzzing with energy and she had lain awake, stuck staring at the ceiling as she waited for it to subside. Flashback. It was the night after Alice's high school graduation, and she was looking up at the glow-in-the-dark stars that had been re-glued to the ceiling several times in the many, many years she'd had them. The glow was weak now, but there was no point in swapping them out for fresh ones since she'd be moving into her college dorms in August. Her childhood bedroom seemed ancient now, the faded green wallpaper matching the books on her bookshelf for wear and tear. This room made her feel old. She was 18 now. Much too mature for childish things such as glow-in-the-dark stickers and fairy stories. Yet she still couldn't help but feel so young. People expected things of her now. Expected her to go to college, to study hard, get a proper job aside from neighborhood dog sitting. She was supposed to figure out how to pay taxes and take out a mortgage and other adult things, but it all felt too soon. Too soon. Her skin buzzed with anxious energy, and her mind whirled with too many thoughts again, all of them talking over each other and aiming to be the loudest voice in her head. That's another thing, she realized, looking over at her dresser and knowing she wouldn't find the pill bottle she needed there. I'll have to call the doctor on my own now to get my prescription. Sighing deeply, she turned her face back up to the faint galaxy on her ceiling. Alice didn't want to walk out of her room to the bathroom to get her pills. She knew without having to look at a clock that it was much too late for her to still be awake. Her door had always creaked too loudly, and she knew her mother would hear it if she tried to sneak out of her room. Her limbs felt heavy as she forced them to move, sitting up in her bed and swinging her legs out above her carpeted floor. She gave herself a moment to get used to the odd texture of the old carpet before she stood up and took to trudging a circle around the center of her room. With each step, the buzzing energy in her limbs subsided a little bit, and her brain felt a little less clogged with spinning wheels. End of flashback. Yes, Alice could remember many moments like that from capital B before, when she would pace in the night to rid herself of the excess energy when she forgot to take her medication. Maybe the same idea would work now. When she compared the way the two sensations felt, parentheses, the capital N now buzz and the capital B before buzz, she could tell they were almost the same. One was just a little more physical than the other, and not a result of her brain chemistry. Alice knew her baby legs didn't have any muscle yet, so she wouldn't be able to walk, and therefore pace, right away. But that didn't mean she couldn't get started on leg stretches so she could pace later. Now was a marvelous time to start, if any. Hold on, let me take a sip of my tea. I love how my model freaks out when I put my cup in front of my face. It just goes crazy. Oh my god, it's absolutely freaking out. Okay. Chapter 3. I should mention, by the way, that this thing only has 9 chapters. That's it. That's all it's got. It's unfinished. And the last time it was updated was in 2021. So, you know. Okay, hold on. Chapter 3. Meet the team. Our lovable protagonist hates learning vocabulary, but she'll do it if she must. Names are finally revealed. So, time skip. Yeah, about that. Yeah, so... sort of. Somewhat. And occasionally. We'll see. We'll have to see. We'll have to see. We'll have to see. We'll just have to see. We'll just have to see. Alice was about 4 months old. So 1 month has passed. She becomes so cocky. When she was forced to learn 6 separate names in the span of 1 day. For better reference, she was maybe learning 2 new vocabulary words per week, let alone 6 in a day. Forced was such a harsh word, though, implying much more demand from those around her than was strictly accurate. No, it was probably better to say she needed to find a way to memorize those names. She absolutely had to, because she knew that there was an extremely low chance of her outright hearing them again for months. However, Alice was blissfully ignorant of the absolute now-no whirlwind that was about to descend upon her when she started her day. In fact, it started almost deceptively, deceptive, deceptively, deceivingly, deceivingly. Deceivingly is a real word. Deceptively is not. Okay, it started almost deceivingly peacefully for the utter chaos that was to befall her later. The sun was shining brightly through the windows, birds were chirping their merry little songs, and Alice was enjoying one of the nicer mornings she'd experienced in this house as she watched her mom hum absently while she cooked a traditional breakfast of fish and rice for her sleepy husband. Things were nice. One might even call the hazy atmosphere that morning idyllic. Big word. Then the first bits of Alice's nice day started to crash down around her poor little ears. She had started to pick up a significant bit of this archaic Japanese dialect about a week ago. Deceptionalified. She had started to pick up a significant bit of this archaic Japanese dialect about a week ago, finally figuring out how it equated to the Tokyo business dialect she had learned in school, capital B, before. The syllables were a little off in some words, and verbs tended to act a little strangely, but she was managing to pick up a decent amount of what her parents said as time continued to pass. Unfortunately for her, this also meant that she had to listen carefully to every conversation she was in range of for better access to new and repeated vocabulary. She couldn't learn if she couldn't listen, after all. This newfound proficiency in listening comprehension caused her to overhear this snippet of breakfast table conversation between her parents. "Good morning. How are you? ... You really ... yesterday." Her mom laughed teasingly. "Don't ... it," her dad replied, sounding and looking rather miserable as he cradled his head in one hand. He perked up a little when his wife started to scoop the rice out of the cooker, bright eyes twinkling as he leaned over her shoulder. "Smells delicious, Miyako. ... You, comma, ... have ... question mark." Her mom laughed again, but took a pause from the frying pan to press a quick and chaste kiss to her husband's lips, even as he smiled cheekily at her. "You too, idiot. Remember, ... because you ... exclamation point. Now stop ... my food, Ryusuke." Both adults missed the wide-eyed glances they got from their 4-month-old, stuck in her high chair at the table. Stuck in her high chair at the table. Alice found herself completely blown out of the water by the fact that she had received not one, but 2 important names in her life at the short span of less than a minute. 4 boring months of hearing her new parents use their baby voices and refer to themselves as mommy and daddy to her, and just now she finally learns their actual names. It's pretty wild, to say the least. To be fair though, her dad wasn't actually home a lot, and mom was definitely on some kind of maternity leave at the moment, so it wasn't like there were a lot of people around for them to use their actual names with. Logical thinking didn't completely get rid of her still reeling mental state though, and she wondered why this was the time of all times for them to stop calling themselves mommy and daddy in her presence. Jimmy and Linda. No, not like this. Maybe the novelty of new parenthood was wearing off, or maybe they'd just forgotten and slipped up. It can't be the first option though, she mused. They can't have gotten tired of it that fast. I remember my parents, capital B before, still calling themselves mama and dada around me up until when preschool started. They probably really did just slip up. Either way though, lucky me. She had to take this opportunity to commit her parents' names to memory as fast as possible, so she couldn't mix them up with any similar words later when she was listening to their conversations. Words that spelled or pronounced themselves similarly to each other were such a pain with Japanese. She still vividly remembered mixing up the word for umbrella with the word for depopulation several times, capital B before. That probably ranked number 5 in the top 10 most embarrassing moments of her old life, writing, quote, depopulation over and over on her homework and tests in complete ignorance. She couldn't, make a similar mistake ever again. It would be especially embarrassing the second time around since Japanese was supposed to be her first language here. She doubted her new parents had ever mixed up, quote, umbrella or depopulation. Thinking about the blatant disapproval in her teacher's eyes at the moment that her linguistic blunder had been revealed still brought a chill down her spine every time. 2 names down. Little did poor Alice know there were still 4 more to go. The hours had passed into the afternoon, and the clock in the living room had just struck 3 when there was a loud knock at the door. Alice did not know that those 3 loud chimes. That's not a knock, but okay. Go off, Vic, go off. Those 3 loud chimes would herald the second big capital N name incident of the day. If she had, she might have asked her parents not to have opened the door that day. Maybe another time, one where she wasn't so tired from repeating her parents' names over and over in her head. Alice's parents, Miyako and Ryusuke, she reminded herself, shared a look. Miyako shrugged in a way that seemed to say, I'm not expecting anyone, are you? Ryusuke shook his head in response, just as confused, before her mom decided to bite the social bullet and see who was at the door. A moment later, 2 men were barreling into the house with wild and reckless abandon. Well, one man was barreling in, and the other was politely following. The second man seemed to be even taller than her dad, who Alice imagined was pretty tall if she compared his height to the cabinetry of the house, and his straight black hair paired with the eye patch over his right eye gave him a rather severe appearance, despite the fact that said hair was long enough to be pulled into a bun. The man also seemed to have an acute case of RBF, which certainly wasn't winning him any points in the, quote, definitely a fun guy division. He was rather pretty, though, in a rough sort of way. Alice was 100% certain that this guy had a fan base a mile wide in the village purely run off of his good looks, even if his personality turned out to be trash. She'd put good money on it. Well, if she had any money, that was. As it stood, she could only hold strong suspicions and wait for them to be confirmed. Neji, well, we'll see. The tall man approached her dad first to talk with him, which left Alice to be positively attacked by the first man who had come through the door. Hello, RBF. Dude, I'm not even sure. No, he can smile. We've seen it. Okay, never mind. He can smile, but only on very rare occasions. He gets 1 smile per year. The tall man approached her dad first to talk with him, which left Alice to be positively attacked by the first man who had come through the door, who she hadn't noticed getting closer while she studied capitals, the tall one. The second man was serious and looked like the perfect dictionary definition of stoic pretty boy. I mean, it did say positively attacked. You know, I don't think her parents would stand for it if it was a real attack. I don't think her parents would stand for it at all. I mean, we saw what happened with the Anbu in the first chapter, you know. I think it's cool. I think we're all cool here. If the second man was serious and looked like the perfect dictionary definition of stoic pretty boy, the first one was his exact and complete opposite. Not that he was ugly or anything. No. He certainly wasn't ugly at all. The first man was definitely handsome, what with his russet hair and strong jaw. But it wasn't noticeable at first sight because the first thing that you saw about him was his energy. The man's energy was, in a word, wild. as wild as a wild beast, with zero of the upright posture and sophisticated air around capitals, the tall one. He had a largely feral sort of humor to his wide grin, and his posture was coiled as if he was ready to spring ferociously at the first thing that twitched wrong. Alice could tell from the huge gray dog at his side and the red triangular marks on his cheeks that this man was 100% Inazuka, which explained the wildness in his presence. She suddenly found herself either lucky or supremely unlucky that she was stuck in this, capitals, infuriating and terrible high chair at this moment, based on the fact that while she was off the ground and therefore wouldn't be trampled by enthusiastic dog paws, but she was also stuck where she couldn't get away from the cooing wolfish man. She recognized both of them from that day in the hospital, where she realized what place she was reborn into. Glancing around and largely ignoring the Inazuka trying to capture her attention, she could tell from the long-suffering yet relaxed expressions her parents were making, and the way these men had been at her dad's bedside in the hospital, that there was a high chance that these two were a part of her dad's Genin team. Genin team? It would probably be Genin if we're talking about actual pronunciation. Genin team. Or had been partnered with him long enough that it didn't matter if they weren't. As she watched the tall one speak with her parents, his eyes flitted over to her absently, and their gazes locked for the briefest moment. A single black eye met her own. She got so much intel on the village. For real. She is a huge security risk. Flitted over to her absently, and their gazes, a single black eye met her own, and that was all the time she needed to deploy her most often used and most dangerous weapon. She giggled at him. She giggled and watched in barely hidden deep fascination as the tall one almost literally melted. Aww. Gone was the natural frown of earlier, replaced by an adoring light in his eye and an upgrade to a neutral set in his mouth that Alice enjoyed immensely. The instantaneous nature of his change in expression was even faster than her dad's was. Now that's something to remember, she thought as she dutifully ignored capitals the Inazuka's jealous whine. He could have her attention later. She was dealing with the tall one now. The tall one came over to her high chair, and she made demanding grabby motions with her chubby little fists. She wanted him to pick her up, to see how far she could push the tall one from his stiff nature so far. When he didn't immediately pick her up, looking unsure of what to do in the face of her demands, Alice made a huffy noise and frowned up at him. She had a hypothesis to test, damn it. Now was not the time for internal debates. The tall one half turned to her parents with a lost look in his eye, but they too were watching this interaction with a morbid fascination. Ryusuke even had a fond tilt to his smile as he looked on at his teammates floundering. The trust here was tangible, and the tall one definitely felt it if the way his face showed the briefest flash of bare hope for a moment was any indication before he turned his gaze back down to the very demanding baby calling for his attention. Gently, so gently, he picked her up in his arms and actually smiled down at her, catching her unawares. It took a long blink and a pause before she found herself freed from that smile, answering with a gummy one of her own. His smile was dangerous in the way that a lonely child's smile is. It showed too much of his heart all at once, and caught whoever looked upon it incredibly off guard with the naked honesty in his joy. Cute. He gets one smile a year, folks. At least she knew for the future. from the sputtering of the Inazuka. Alice gathered that this was a rare occurrence and committed the wholesome event to her memory. If that was the case, she was definitely making it her goal to make this man smile more whenever she could. Then, the mind. The tall one, still smiling that wholesome smile, poked her cheek with a finger and cooed. Actually cooed. Wait, what's his voice gonna be? Hello.
Oh man.
Hello, Aiko-chan.
I'm Yuta. ... Dad's friend. ... You ... cutest. Which, what? Another double name drop. And her own name in the mix to boot. Oh my god, she's been upgraded.
Round-eyed, Alice, no, Aiko, blinked dumbfoundedly up at Yuta. How am I gonna remember all these names? Miyako, Ryusuke, Aiko, and now Yuta? That's too many. Balefully, she looked at the Inazuka,
dreading his own personal name reveal.
He grinned back, completely missing the point of her look and simply rejoicing that she was finally acknowledging him. It was awful. If he had a tail, it would be wagging right now. She was sure of it. His general attitude gave her an idea, though. A way to draw out his name, even if she'd rather not have to deal with it right now. She might as well hear them all in one go and sort it out later, rather than waiting a few months to hear it again. Her plan was What? Her plan was clever. It was brilliant. Parentheses. It was very, very stupid, and remembering this moment later would make her cringe at her own foolishness. She hated people thrusting their expectations on her, and this wasn't going to help her any. Locking her eyes with the Inazuka, she twisted her arm and pointed her pudgy finger at where she could vaguely see Yuta's face in her peripheral vision. Not looking away from those wild, honey eyes for a single moment, she opened her mouth and very clearly attempted to say, Yuta. What actually came out, because of her untrained and relatively unrefined vocal cords, was you, and some following gurgling noises. Arr. It was enough, though, and the entire room just stopped for a moment. The Inazuka's eyes were huge, and his mouth was gaping open as he stared at her. She could practically feel the way the whole room was staring at her in a similar manner. Yuta seemed to be holding his breath. She dared not look at him in case he was smiling an even more dangerous smile. Aiko didn't think she could handle him beaming at her, and it was a very real possibility at the moment. It might not have been a true first word, but after another heartbeat of shocked silence, the room erupted into chaos. The Inazuka seemed to be stricken that Aiko had said Yuta's name first, and Yuta himself was looking at her with the widest eyes she had ever seen as her mom pulled her from his arms and hugged Aiko close to her chest. Ryusuke seemed to be torn between throttling Yuta for getting his kid's precious first word to be Yuta instead of Dad, and so very proud that his daughter had said her first word. No one seemed to mind that she hadn't even finished the word, just that she had tried. It was chaos. Line break. Once everything had calmed down, the Inazuka started to try his hand at getting Aiko to say his name as well. He seemed to have this weird rivalry thing going on with Yuta, from what she could tell, and kept pointing to himself and cooing out some syllables that didn't make any sense to her because he was speaking to her in a baby voice. How am I supposed to say your name if you don't say it properly in the first place? I can't read your mind, idiot. Needless to say, it wasn't going very well. At least her plan had worked. Somewhat. She was making an effort, though, because she was going to learn the names of her dad's genin teammates, even if it killed... ... even if it was going to be as difficult in the future as this Inuzuka idiot, capitalized, was making it right now. As far as she could tell from the multiple times he'd had to repeat it while she stared at him blankly, it was either Koji or Koki. That last syllable was a real doozy to pin down. Oddly enough, Koji, maybe Koki's Ninken, had a much easier name to learn than the Inuzuka idiot, capitalized, himself. The big greyhound was named Shun, and instantly Aiko found that she loved him more than life itself. Honestly, me too. For real. So true. Me too. Petting the gruff ninja dog was much more rewarding than listening to the same name being repeated over and over until she felt bored to tears. Burying her chubby face in the soft fur, Aiko tuned out the chatter of the adults as she thought back on the day. It was a nice day, all things considering. She could tell that her dad's genin teammates were good people, even if the Inuzuka idiot, capitalized, was perhaps the most draining person she'd known in both lives. Yuta at least seemed like company she would grow to enjoy as she got older. He seemed like the type to not mind a comfortable silence. Her fingers grew slack in Shun's fur as she yawned suddenly, feeling the effects of the day start to catch up with her. I wonder when this body of mine will get a little stronger, she mused silently as her eyes started to drift shut. It sure would be nice to be able to stay awake for more than a few hours on my own. The voices of her mother and father filtered into her sleepy brain, faintly saying something to Yuta and the Inuzuka idiot, capitalized, but she was unable to catch it before she was completely adrift in the world of dreams. Line break. It was the middle of the night when she awoke with a start. The feeling of a heavy weight filling her chest and the grasping tendrils of panic holding her tight still fresh in her memories. Aiko took in lungfuls of air desperately, as if trying to convince herself that she still could. There was a spinning mobile of glass stars high above her head, and the light in her peripheral vision was not that of high beams refracted through water, but that of a moon through her nursery window. She was small, not big, and her nightmare faded away quickly as those realizations grounded her in the here and now. She had clearly been asleep longer than a few hours if it was already nighttime, however. Actually, yeah, no, she missed the entire day, because I think chapter started in the morning, and it's now the middle of the night with the moon up. That's crazy. That's like 20 hours of sleep. It's not. But like, that's a full day. That's a whole full day. Hey, actually, no, hold on. Back to it. Quote, I've been wasting precious time, she thought. Leveraging herself up into a sitting position, she used the bars of her crib to fully stand on mildly wobbly legs. It had only been a month and a half since she had begun vigorously training her legs, and she had surpassed crawling a few weeks ago. Now she was working on standing upright with and without support. Aiko's chubby fists grabbed the bars holding her up like a lifeline, eyes intense as she stared down at her small feet and willed herself to let go. I can do it. I can stand up. One fist fell to her side, and Aiko swayed dangerously for a moment, but she remained standing tall for her small stature as it quickly passed. Under my own power. Both fists were clenched by Aiko's sides now, and a tremulous grin gleamed in the low light of the moon as two little legs held her up of their own accord, knees threatening to buckle at any moment, but staying strong. And I'm gonna be so real with you guys. I think possibly, and don't kill me, hey, I'm just the messenger. I think this is possibly where I'm gonna have to cut the stream because we're about to reach the 3-hour mark. And I have been reading almost nonstop for 3 hours and my throat is starting to hurt. Don't kill me. I promise we'll get back to it, okay? We'll get back to chapter 4. We still got 5 chapters left to go. Another stream. Another time. We'll get it another time. Don't worry. We'll come back to it. We'll come back to it, I promise. But this is probably where I'm gonna head out tonight. Or I guess morning for literally anyone. Actually, it's 5 in the morning. That's crazy. But I hope this was really fun, and I hope that the reading was cool, and I was really excited to debut my model. So, yippee! And I'll see you all on the flip side. Bye bye! Bye bye! Adios! Bye bye!